Right now, we'd like to bring on a young man who believes in doing things his own way. And based on the way he kind of get next to all of the folks who've seen him work, his way has got to be pretty hip. So let's lay some noise.
Listen on me, boy.
2000 and beyond.
To fight for this so-called democracy.
Yeah, so yesterday morning, I had this big plan that I was going to be waking up and starting to write a couple of articles for What the Buck. I had all this stuff planned. I wanted to talk about not just the uniforms and compare the new uniforms because I was waiting for the Chargers outfits to come out and they were super dope. I think they might have taken the whole race as far as all of the uniforms that came out. And then I was going to write all this long piece about O.J. Howard and where he stood with the BUCS since he had all these rumors coming out that he wasn't going to be around. About, I guess it was like 9 o'clock in the morning, man, the whole damn thing complete. I had to throw everything I had been writing for like 3 hours. I had to throw it out the window. Every single thing I could have been writing, O.J. Howard, the uniforms, all of it went out the window because this dude, Rob Gronkowski, this cat just came out and, he just basically took over the whole news as far as the BUCS are concerned. It was crazy. Evan, you guys basically I think you guys had to restart a complete whole podcast you guys were doing, or you guys had just finished wrapping up a podcast when that happened. How did you take this? Evan of Canon 5 Podcast has been gracious enough to join me on this. Evan, how did you guys take what was happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. We had just finished recording our draft podcast, and probably about 5 minutes after we were done recording, that's when Ian Rappaport's tweet first came out that, Gronkowski told the Patriots that he was interested in playing football and he only wanted to do it for the BUCS. So we really sat there and we just waited pretty much because we were like, we didn't really get off the line with each other. We were like, well, we might as well stay on. And 20 minutes later, there was a deal. So it was amazing how quick it all happened. But, I mean, I think we pretty much realized that they've been talking for a few weeks now. It's definitely a surprise. It's not something that I expected. I think probably more surprised at this than I was at the Brady news, just because, the dude was retired. You don't really expect, Rob Gronkowski to come out of retirement and play for the Buccaneers, let alone Tom Brady play for the Buccaneers. So if you would have told me, April 22nd, 2019, if you would have told me, 1 year from now that we'd be in a pandemic and Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski would be on the BUCS, I'd be telling you, I don't know what you got going on over there, but you got to fix it. But yeah, it was a very surprising move, and it's been a crazy 24 hours.
No, it's super, super weird. Also joining me, man, we got Thomas Bassinger of the Tampa Bay Times. Thomas, I know you had just written some stuff for your Red Zone newsletter for the BUCS the past weekend. Did you have any idea that you ended up having to completely, like, what you wrote that when everything that went into that newsletter basically got flipped upside down and you have to completely outdo yourself some kind of way with this whole Gronkowski news?
Yeah, so I've kind of been in draft mode, right? And have been a little behind schedule with my draft research because of the pandemic, of course, and adjusting to that. So I had been in draft mode, and then this news comes along, and I mean it's hard to believe on one hand. On the other, you're like, well, you know what? This is 2020. Tom Brady. Coronavirus. Everything. Nothing makes sense. But so, well, here we go again, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, caused a shift in the way I'm thinking about covering the draft, and I'm sure the Bucks, I'm sure, this was in the works for some weeks. So I doubt this changes their draft plans too much, but it certainly changes the way we cover it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it doesn't. I'm not sure that it does not affect the way that they draft. In fact, I'm fearful of it affecting the way that they draft. Now, it's scary for me. Like I was speaking with Evan before we went on, and my whole deal is, again, kind of something I've been on for the whole freaking off season. It's about this whole win now mentality. Like, what do we do in the draft differently that they are? How does this move change the draft, if at all? It's a scary thing to me, because now I'm starting to question whether or not if it goes the same way I felt like it went a couple years ago, where they go all in on the offense and then they kind of leave the defense lagging. Evan, did you? What was your thoughts kind of way that Light handled the team for the past 5 seasons, so as far as constructing the team? Like, did you feel like he leaned far too heavily on one side of the ball and kind of like felt like he had himself completely in a good space and he started playing around with picks too much, or he didn't allocate enough resources on one side of the ball as opposed to the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at just the start of his tenure, his first 2 drafts, I believe, drafted 1 defensive player. That was Quan Alexander. And I just think that, in the NFL, you got to find a balance. And, he did put a lot of resources into the offensive side of the ball. Drafted, obviously a wide receiver. His first ever pick was a wide receiver inside the top 10, which I felt was needed. But, and then you go tight end and running back, and then again and again and again. And then, you drafted tight end in 2014 in the second round, and then in 2017, you're drafting one in the first round. Dishing out big money to guys like Deshaun Jackson and Ryan Jensen. So it's definitely been more of a focus on the offense. And I mean, I do sort of share that concern with you that maybe, they are ignoring the defense a little bit too much. I think maybe there's a little bit too much faith there in the defense, specifically in the secondary. I like the Bucs secondary, but it's also a very young secondary. So if I had to say, one thing that would concern me the most, it would be probably that.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic. Thomas, your thoughts on that same deal? I know we've kind of had this conversation a little bit, or at least we kind of back and forth via social media. I mean, do you have a fear or you have a sense of this possibly going the same way with Light?
Well, I think we've been in this mode now for a few seasons, right? This kind of win now mode, and yes, for the first couple of seasons, they went offense heavy, right? And I think at the time, I understood the sense in that. The offense after that 2013 season needed a total rebuild. So so you start kind of laying the groundwork in 2014. You draft your quarterback in 2015, and you want to build around him. And then 2016 comes along, and you realize, okay, well, we really need to restock the defense, and we need a kicker. Where things really went wrong for this franchise was that draft. I think a lot of teams can withstand a bad draft, but I think given the point where the Bucs were, and how many needs they had on really both sides of the ball, they just weren't in position, I think, to really just bomb a draft. And now Ryan Smith is the only guy left from that draft. The past couple of drafts have been a bit more balanced, but again, we're still in win now mode, and actually I think they should be. I'm not. I don't know that. The picks they make this year, that you can count on them making an immediate impact. maybe if they draft a tackle in the first round that they really want. But
specifically, offensive tackle
yeah,
or defensive tackle? I gotta be specific on this one
offensive
because
tackle.
okay,
Right, yeah, right. But we're basically, I think, in 2020 and 2021 mode, right? And after that, I mean, we're not really ready to talk about it yet because I mean we're there's so much going on in the present and there's a lot to be excited about. But the BUCS are probably headed for some kind of rebuild after the 2021 season. So I do think that once you sign Brady, and you have Bruce Arians for maybe another couple of seasons too, you're kind of making that call that we're going all in. Not that you want to leave things totally bare after 2021, but you've got a very small window here, and you look at their cap situation, that reflects that too. It's just not a sustainable situation. So, I understand the concern, and at the same time, it just, well, it is what it is.
See, and that was my fear, and that was also something Evan and I spoke to as we were going on here. The whole, you basically got a 2-year window, which I hate. I hate it so bad. This win now. I would rather win more than win now because this feels like a huge swing. Like we're just basically choking up on the bat and taking the biggest swing possible. And if we miss, it's like we're out, like just completely bombed out. If with this roster, with all these things that's happening, allocating this $10 million salary to Gronkowski, which would basically be 2 years of a fourth rounder, if it was a fourth round pick, it's like only $1 million, like for 4 years to have someone. You're basically taking this and you're making it. If he can't make this work in season 1, what make you think he can make magic happen in season 2 of this win now mode under Bruce Arians, which is actually this would be number 2 for Bruce Arians because last year he did the same thing. Another reason I wanted to jump in at one point and say Rod Smith, who I believe was a fourth rounder. Am I wrong?
Yep.
He was a fourth rounder. That fourth rounder, again, like Quan Alexander, just keeps churning out, ways for the BUCS to keep using it. But a lot of people think that because it was a fourth rounder, it means nothing. Like there's no absolute, there's nothing good come out of fourth rounder. So giving up a fourth was nothing for Gronkowski. I don't think anybody is complaining about the Gronkowski move until you start looking at what would it stop or what would it hinder? Like, would it hinder or would it expedite the exit of an O.J. Howard? Evan, can you speak on that for me? We and I kind of spoke about it just a few moments ago, but my fear is expediting the exit of O.J. Howard and putting all the eggs in one basket with Gronkowski. O.J. Howard, I feel, can do a lot of the things that Gronkowski can do. He just hasn't done them. He didn't do them last season. The previous 2 seasons, I felt like you saw flashes of some of the things he can do. But how do you think the move for Gronkowski affects the outlook of O.J. Howard?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's been Howard rumors dating back to last trade deadline, so they definitely got louder now. And, like you said about Howard not doing the things that he did in his first 2 years as far as explosiveness and touchdown catches and stuff like that, and you kind of said that, I think I saw on Twitter that, well, when he's playing right tackle kind of, what do you expect him to do? And a lot of times he had to stay in and block, and that is going to hinder a player's performance. But, I don't think they'll just give him away. I think it still has to be the right deal. I think they'd be okay with keeping him, but they really started to talk, and my fear is, that they think that, they have Gronkowski, they have Brate. Okay, well, maybe, if you're offered a mid 4th round pick, well, maybe that's not too bad. Whereas, beforehand, maybe you were only asking for, a 3rd round pick or something, but now you're more comfortable with that when OJ Howard still has his rookie deal, and he has a 5th-year option potentially coming up. Those are, crucial years to determine whether a player is going to be back with you or not. And right now, it just seems like they're sort of giving up on him for, like you said, a win now move.
Yeah, and it's super scary to me. I absolutely hate it. I loathe it. I almost compared. I put it in the same realm as I do with the re-signing of Ndamukong Suh. Like, you can argue Ndamukong Suh is a solid player, and he had a decent year last year next to Vita Vea. But if re-signing him meant holding back on drafting his replacement, that makes me super worried. It actually pisses me off because you can do better than that Ndamukong Suh at his 33 years of age at this point. You can absolutely.
Yeah, that shouldn't stop you from drafting a guy like Javon Kinlaw at 14.
Man, I swear to Moses, if we don't draft Javon Kinlaw and he's available, I'm going to kick 2 puppies. The cutest 2 puppies I find, I swear to Moses, I'm kicking them. It's crazy. That would upset me. Thomas, you mentioned the offensive tackle conversation. That's been, a big deal. A lot of people think that offensive tackle is the move. What would an offensive tackle do for this offense when you have Gronkowski, Brady, Evans, Godwin, possibly Howard, Brate, possibly Brate. Brate could be on the move. Who knows? Like, what would a right tackle basically take them over the top? Would he make a difference in the game more so than maybe a defensive end or a defensive tackle?
No, first, it's a great question. First, I just want to chime in on the OJ Howard point too. Like, I'm confused about this as much as you guys are, and maybe there's something going on behind the scenes. I don't really know, but I don't understand how a guy who in 2018 I think was one of the 5 best tight ends in the NFL, goes from all of a sudden becomes a bad football player. I don't believe it. He was great at Alabama, and we saw flashes of it in more than flashes of it in 2018. He was very much trending upward, and then you hear these whispers, in reports that I saw something questioning his instincts, and I'm like, well, I don't know where that's coming from. His instincts looked fine to me in 2018. I mean, he definitely took a step backward.
2017 as well.
Yeah, he definitely took a step backward in last season. I don't know whether that was, had something to do with maybe being in Arians' doghouse and just a rough start to the season, kind of lingering. I don't know, but I'd be very intrigued to see both Gronkowski and Howard on the field at the same time. That'd be my preference. And part of the reason for Howard's decline in production last year, as you guys just hit on, was they used him differently than Cutter was using him. He was featured as a receiver a lot more in 2018. I think he went out on routes only about a third of the time last season. So I mean that's kind of something that's kind of getting lost in all this. I just he's a player that I've always been pretty high on, so maybe that's factoring into this. But I'd be really reluctant to part with him. Versus Cameron Brate, who's been a fun player to watch. I think one of the great success stories of the light era. Draft, an undrafted free agent, and a fan favorite. But when you see him on the field, that more likely than not, he's going out on a pass route. So there's an element of predictability there. So, I think, I'd really like to see. I think the BUCS offense could be a real matchup nightmare if the combination is Evans, Godwin, Gronkowski, and Howard. As for right tackle, or I think the reason why you go right tackle there is what are your other options at right tackle? You're not going to find one in free agency, right? Unless you bring back DeMar Dotson, who I think is pretty clear, that he's on the final on the back end of his career. So I mean, you just don't find tackles in free agency, good ones. Sometimes you get lucky. The best place to get them is in the draft. So I think that's why you go tackle, the offensive tackle. Somewhere early in this draft. I don't know that you have to trade up for one. I know there's talk about there's a cutoff at the after the top 4 offensive tackles. I don't know that you trade up for one, but if one falls to you there at 14, I think that's hard to pass up.
Yeah, see, I don't think I'm completely opposite of a lot of what's been going around. Like I'm absolutely in favor of having drafting a right tackle in this draft. I've been on that since probably 2015. I thought DeMar Dotson was a liability in the run game for the last 5-6 years of his career. In the pass game, I thought he was relatively solid, and when it came to the run game, he literally he just didn't move. He just didn't move anyone. He occupied his spot, and it was just like pass protection. He didn't move anyone back. I say he didn't move anybody back. Obviously, that's a little bit of hyperbole. He did it eventually, I guess, on a few plays, but for the most part, he didn't. He went upright a lot. And his guy basically just had to stay in place until the runner came close to them, and that's how I felt a lot of when it comes to DeMar Dotson. I don't think there needs to be a first-round right tackle being selected. I don't see a right tackle. I think you can get a right tackle in the second, third, fourth round and be solid. I actually think that the the offensive tackle depth in this draft probably is comparable to the wide receivers. That's not a popular opinion, but there are a whole lot of offensive tackles in this draft. Unless you're talking about picking one of those top 4 as your left tackle, I completely understand that argument, and I think that's completely true. In that realm, being that the top 4 tackles could definitely come in and be someone's starting a left tackle. We have DeMar Dotson. I don't know if they feel like they're moving on from DeMar Dotson, or everybody's trying to play that old video game strategy of just taking DeMar Dotson and moving him from the left tackle to the right tackle. That's a pretty tough thing to do. Evan, you've probably taken a look at some of these guys in the draft. Is there somebody from the draft that you feel like it could unseat DeMar Dotson in his rookie season and have them just get rid of him or try to move him? Is there one of those, any of those tackles, top 4, whoever, second round, third round, that you feel like is the absolute guy that could come in and take DeMar Dotson off his spot?
Do you mean Donovan Smith?
I probably said, yeah, Donovan Smith. So sorry.
Okay, there you're good. Well, I think really I like Andrew Thomas from Georgia. I think he's played, I believe, 3 seasons as the starter at left tackle for Georgia. So I definitely think he has the experience. I think he could come in and. I mean, the problem is that it's been reported that, or rumored, I should say, that Smith doesn't want to play like right tackle at all. And obviously, based on like the structure of his contract, they can't just cut him because there'll be like a bunch of dead cap. So I think that, do you bench him? Maybe. But I think a guy like Andrew Thomas could play left, could also play right. Tristan Wirfs, I think, could come in. I think those two, when you're talking about left tackle, I think those two guys are probably the most pro-ready. Mekhi Becton, I think, might have the most potential out of the group, but I think he needs a little bit more work. And then Jedrick Wills, I think, is more of a natural right tackle, but I think he's a really good right tackle. But I think he's played right tackle his whole career at Alabama. I'm not saying he can't play left tackle. I just think that the natural spot for him would be right.
Okay, so I mean, if you had but you definitely would not oppose to having any of those top guys come in.
No,
as
yeah, I think the Bucks, if they end up with any of those four, and I'm in the same boat, you end the night with any of those four, you're pretty happy.
All right. On that same note, is it a complete disappointment if you don't come away with those guys and one of them's available?
I mean, I think that all depends. A Javon Kinlaw, I think, would be a pretty good consolation prize. Javon Kinlaw or Derek Brown, I think, would be a pretty good fit. I also like Josh Jones, offensive tackle from Houston. I don't like him as much as the other four, but I do think there are other options in the first round besides those four.
Okay. And Mr. Bassinger, on the heels of your binging and deep diving into the draft prospects, what have you seen from any of those offensive tackle guys that make you feel like they have to be the one, or do you even feel that way?
Well, I don't want to suggest that I'm an offensive tackle, offensive line scout by any stretch, but
everybody else
I just want to back up. Right. I just want to back up Evan on a couple of points here. If those top four guys that he talked about are gone, then chances are somebody like Kinlaw's has fallen. And I again to echo his point, not a bad consolation prize at all. I can't stress enough how reluctant I would be to trade up, because looking at the draft order, you might have to trade up to maybe 9 with Jacksonville to do that.
9's probably the latest, I think, too.
Yeah, because there's a couple of teams in front of the BUCS that are going to be looking for an offensive tackle. So and in order to go from 14 to 9, I think that's going to cost you at least a third round pick, and that's just a tough call, because the chances, research shows that the chances of a player turning out better than the next player chosen at that position, the chances are that's a coin flip. So is taking that chance really worth a third round pick? I think the BUCS pick 74th overall. That's a spot. With some of the receiver depth in this draft. Keep in mind in 2017, a little bit later in the third round, they got Chris Godwin. So, I know that's I'm picking a bit of an outlier there, but those aren't throwaway picks.
I don't know if it's an outlier, man. I think up until the fourth round, I believe you still have starter level talent pretty much every year of the draft, all the way up to the fourth round. I mean, obviously it goes beyond that, but I wouldn't put any pick 1 through 4 and be like, we have this as an expendable pick. Like it's. I mean, we've seen it too many times. William Golston is one of the longest tenured BUCS on this team now, 4th round pick. We talked about Ryan Smith being the lone survivor of the 2016. Quan Alexander, Jordan Whitehead from a couple years ago. People completely wrote him off, like just because he was a 4th round pick. He's come in and I think he's solid enough to be the starter. Obviously, there needs to be somebody else around, but yeah, I don't think there's such. I mean, every pick has a value. Every pick has a value, and it has some weight to it. So 1 through 4, I wouldn't play with any of those, especially for a team that, again, we're really short on long-term talent. Our high paid guys right now are like 1-2 year guys, and that kind of makes me nervous. And again, it's such a big swing.
Right, and that's kind of where I'm at. I think there's enough needs on this team, and not just for 2020, but looking out a little farther. When some of these guys are through with their 1-year contracts, or there's no more dead money left on their contracts after this season. Looking out a little bit, there's some holes that the BUCS are going to need to fill, and like a 3rd round pick, is one that I'd be really, really reluctant to part with. In fact, I might even want to try to add one. I mean, along the defensive line, especially, you've got Ndamukong Suh, who's 33, Jason Pierre-Paul, who's 31, and Shaq Barrett's on a franchise tag.
Yeah.
I might want to load up on defensive linemen. So, or even, like I said, maybe another receiver or even another defensive back. I think, this roster is a bit front loaded. So, I'd be looking to add as much depth as possible.
Yeah. So I want to back up real quick and get back to the, basically the news of the week. This Gronkowski move. Obviously, some of the pros of the Gronkowski move is you have basically 3 starter level tight ends. Bad news, probably only 2 of them see the field at the same time. I mean, it's good to have a backup and so forth. But if we saw and heard that Bruce Arians will not utilize a tight end in his natural space, kind of like the way that we saw him not really use O.J. Howard. What changes because it's Gronkowski, and why? Like, is that going to be?
It's the quarterback. It's the quarterback throwing to him.
That's a
I
huge
think Tom
deal.
Brady.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Tom Brady will definitely get Gronkowski involved. If Bruce Arians doesn't, Gronkowski will.
Yeah. And I think that's a big deal. That's a huge deal, and I think that should have been. I think that should be a huge part of the critique on O.J. Howard as well. Again, having to see that he was moving between additional right tackle, and being a tight end. I mean, he still had some issues on his own that he needed to correct and so forth, but it was a big deal. Thomas, man, do you see any like overwhelming cons or just super big positives that would tilt somebody's opinion of them, or have somebody take a look at it and say, okay, well, this changes my mind, or possibly changes my mind on this Gronkowski acquisition? Because there are a lot of people out there who don't like it for one reason or another.
Well, I think, you have to start with his injury history, right? Back issues, knee, forearm. The guy was really beat up in 2018, and he was still a really good player, but he wasn't as productive and efficient as he had been in his previous seasons. So, he was definitely banged up and felt like he needed to take a year off, from football, and maybe even retire. So, I think that's number one. And then he's 31. That's not exactly old, but when you're old and you've taken, your body's taken that kind of beating, we can talk all we want about how the BUCS traded for one of the all-time great tight ends.
Yeah. But
that's what he's accomplished. That's not necessarily an indication of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you're paying $10 million for it. And I think, Robert, you touched on this a bit ago. In a vacuum, okay, you pay Rob Gronkowski $9.5–10 million. You can find the cap space, but what is the issue? Is what is that going to keep you from doing elsewhere? Is that going to keep you from signing a veteran defensive back? Is that going to keep you from signing a veteran running back? What is that going to? Does that mean you're going to have to restructure somebody's contract, and that's going to take away from your cap next year? It's. I think when you analyze this trade, I think you want to look at the total picture. We can quibble over the value of a 4th round pick. I don't think that was. I'm not going to call it a bargain. I don't know that I would call it an overpay either.
Right.
But that's that has a value attached to it, and I get that it was a comp pick, but to me, it doesn't matter how you receive the pick. How you receive the pick shouldn't change how you spend it. You know, just because you got it as a compensatory pick doesn't mean it's a free pick.
Mhm.
You know, it's still a draft pick. It's still something you can. It's still a player you can draft that might be a valuable contributor to your football team. But you know, so again, you know, I won't. I can't go as far as calling this. This isn't a bargain to me. This isn't a slam dunk. It may very well work out. I think one of the positives is that Brady now has somebody that he has one of his favorite targets on the team. He has somebody who he has a rapport with, somebody that can help him build this offense, can help him feel more comfortable, and vice versa. Brady can help Gronk feel more comfortable. You know, I just don't know that it's an upgrade in star power, no question about it. Is it an upgrade in X's and O's, a clear X's and O's upgrade? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's going to be it's just going to be super interesting to see how it plays out. I would love to see Howard and Gronkowski together, at least the threat of having both of them, because how do you game plan for either one of them, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's just a really tricky situation. It's easy to get excited about until you start thinking about what's next. It's kind of like somebody who goes out and buy a bunch of groceries or ingredients for a good recipe, but they still don't know how to make the recipe. You know what I mean? Like it's almost I guess in a sense too, like college. Like college, you can have like a program that has like a whole lot of star power, a whole lot of guys that are individually good with a whole lot of accolades. But when you put all of them together, it's going to take some figuring out to find out how to make everybody work well together and actually be able to put everybody in a place where all of them they can show off what they do. And that's going to take a lot of good coaching to do it. Bruce Arians has a whole lot on his plate when it comes to the talent that he's got. Like he has an abundance of options and offensive firepower and hashtag weapons, which I hate. It's just so much. Like, could this backfire? Could this somehow? I hate to be pessimistic, and I'm not really being pessimistic. I'm trying to think of, both sides of the aisle here. Like, could this be something that could hurt a Bruce Arians or any coach when you have this much firepower? The Tampa Bay offense was solid before Brady, in my opinion. If they just got out their own way, they would have been more than solid. They got Brady. That's a whole other level. And then you have Gronkowski, Brady's favorite weapon. Could this somehow backfire on Jason Light and or Bruce Arians the way that this has come together? And Thomas, Evan, I'll start with you on that, man. I know it's a tough question. It's kind of convoluted and it's a long question to answer. But is there a way that this couldn't work and it just looks terrible for the GM and the coach?
I mean, it definitely could. The way it could is basically, was Tom Brady at times poor last year because of the lack of weapons, or was he poor just because he's 42, going to be 43 years old? Gronkowski, can he still run? He's going to be 31 by the time he's going to be 31 in like 2-3 weeks. So it could definitely backfire. Is the ignoring the defense, just bringing everybody back? That's great, but is it going to catch up to him? I don't think you can count on Shaq Barrett again for 19 and a half sacks or whatever he had. I just don't think that number's going to happen again. So it could definitely backfire. And if it does, I mean, that likely means that Jason Light and Bruce Arians are probably both gone. And I don't even know. Brady, I assume, may retire. I don't know what would happen. I mean, it gets pretty ugly if it does backfire. But, I mean, I think it's a high risk, high reward situation. I think the high reward thing is you're going to the playoffs, making a deep playoff run, and then the high risk is obviously you go 6-10 or 5-11, and you got to tear it down.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, define backfire. What's backfire?
Backfire for me, I guess in this scenario when it comes to Bruce Arians, people actually start to question. Somebody other than myself start questioning this whole quarterback whisper deal. Backfire as in not knowing what to do with an actual good quarterback. In his time, he's not really had really great quarterbacks, and he actually did really, really well with when it comes to, let's say, Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger was a solid game manager, and Bruce Arians' team, when it comes to the Steelers, and pretty much every other team he's had, they've all been top 10 defenses, and the offense has just done well enough, except for one season in Arizona. So I'm curious to see if his credentials come into question with this kind of offensive firepower, with this kind of a team that's assembled, and for the most part, no, I can't say the most part it was already there because it wasn't. But like, could this be bad for him as an offensive coach, or somebody who's been known as an offensive coach?
I mean, this may come back to haunt me, but it's hard for me to see the floor for this team being anything lower than 7 wins, right? I feel like they were better than a 7-9 team last year, and I think with simply better decision making by quarterback and coach. I don't want to let Bruce Arians off the hook here. Some of his fourth down decision making cost them points and cost them points and cost them football games. So I think with some better decision making, I think I don't know that they're a lock for the playoffs last year, but they could have squeezed 9 wins out of last year, I think pretty easily. And I think with Tom Brady in the mix, barring injury here, unless we're watching Blaine Gabbert for 12 games.
Is there a worse name in football?
I think this offense, the floor of this offense comes up to at least average, and maybe top, conservatively top 12 or so. And I think if you factor in a little bit of regression from the defense, I think that kind of gets them in playoff contention. And plus, there's 7 teams now. I think big. That kicks in for the 2020 season, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, so I think 9-7 gets you in. And I think the Vegas line right now, after the Gronkowski signing, it moved to 9.5. So, I think that's about right. I think 9 wins or so. So I think if they get there, and I think that's realistic, I think Bruce Arians' legacy is safe. It's this again. This may come back to haunt me, but like this seems really difficult to botch.
Yeah, see, that's where it gets scary. Like, how can this not work? That's the kind of stuff that get people kicked the hell out fast. Like, that's my fear, is that it's almost too good to be true. And again, this was almost, and this again for me, this was before yesterday's news of Gronkowski. Gronkowski is a wild card for me in this whole deal. The fact that Tom Brady, the ultimate game manager in my mind, which is not a slight whatsoever. He's one of the best ever. I have a different opinion than others as far as greatest of all time, but he is definitely one of the best ever, and he knows how to manage games, and he knows how to make things happen. That is a big, big deal, but he already had that and Brady, and now he has Brady's favorite target and somebody Brady can lean on no matter what happens. So it is. I feel like it's almost too good to be true. And again, it's going to take some good coaching, some way better than what we saw from last season, to kind of make this thing, just fall apart. Oh, I'm sorry, to actually make it work. It's going to take a whole lot better coaching than what we saw last season, because it was weird last season. Like, it was, the whole decision to not have a backup quarterback, which again, apparently he feels the same thing this year. Don't even have a backup quarterback. Just go. And if you don't win with Brady, you don't win at all. Those kind of decisions make me nervous from Bruce Arians. Like, does he do the same thing with Gronkowski? Like, you just have that one guy who can possibly block and go out and make catches? Like, that kind of stuff scares me. Evan, do you have any other fears on that, man? Or, like, is it just is what it is? Obviously, a lot of people, like myself, just kind of like, we just want to wait and see. But there's some stuff I still want to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with the coaching. It definitely has to be better. At times, it did, lose them points and lose them football games. And, everybody has to be better. The BUCS, for this thing to be turned around, the offensive line, I think the offensive line gets a little bit too much hate, but I still think that needs to be improved, of course. That needs to be better. The run game needs to be better. You can have Tom Brady back there and Rob Gronkowski and all these weapons, and that's great. If he can't have any time to throw, we've seen in the past what happens when Tom Brady starts to get hit. Things start to unravel a little bit. And, so the entire team needs to step up. Vita Vea, the entire defensive line, they still need to be productive. They're really counting on the guys returning on the defensive line to be good. Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett and Ndamukong Suh and Vita Vea, they're really hoping that, that sort of rotation that they had could work again. And I think it can. But, there is some risk involved there. The secondary, like I said, very young. That could be the make or break thing for this football team. If the secondary can hold up and be, average to above average, I mean, I think this team could make a deep playoff run. But if they struggle because, sophomore slumps or just inexperience, I think, it could lead to just more mediocrity.
Yeah, that was something I didn't even touch on, was the whole possibility of sophomore slumps and everything from these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a possibility, and I mean, it's not a lock that Sean Murphy-Bunting and Jamel Dean and Mike Edwards barely saw the field last year. You don't know what you really have in him. So, and even Jordan Whitehead's still a young guy. Carlton Davis is still a young guy. So and there's always a chance that things couldn't go according to plan.
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, like every other season, everything's kind of up in the air until the first couple of games. You don't know what you have until at least week 5, week 6, at least in my opinion. That's what I've seen. But again, we're talking about another win now move. Since 2017, the BUCS have basically been in super win now move, and they've won 17 games.
Ever since that 9-7, that 5-game streak that they had in 2016, I think that's really started this whole win now thing. Because you remember that offseason, they signed Deshaun Jackson and Chris Baker and drafted O.J. Howard and Chris Godwin. Then ever since then, well, what has it gotten you? Like you said, 17 wins. Yeah,
and it's always sucked. I know, Thomas, you had written about this several times, and we're just kind of backtracking it a little bit and kind of go back and look at that transition from the 2016 season to 2017 win now. We got to do it now. We've got what we need now. In that year of 2017, again, this is where the defense on that team basically had suffered all these injuries. So everybody who was a starter, if I'm not mistaken, missed at least 2 games, if I'm not mistaken, or they played hurt for a few games. That's my big fear for this upcoming season. You mentioned this earlier, Evan, when we talked about, bringing everybody back who you had. And I feel like that could be a sign of complacency. Like, you can't just bring back the guys you had. You have to upgrade in some positions. You at least have to strengthen your back end as far as your rotation. Like, you have to have guys who can come in and come in as either rotational players or, switching out starters and be able to at least hold up the same level as your starters. You can't expect Ndamukong Suh to come in.
Let's not forget when the year they went 10-6 in 2010, and that offseason their big signing was a punter. Now I know obviously this offseason has been much bigger than that, signing Tom Brady and trading for Rob Gronkowski. But on the defensive side, it's almost been like the same deal, just bringing guys back and hoping that it works. I think the defense has a ton of talent, but I mean it's a big risk.
Right, and
Robert, Robert, you made a really good point a minute ago about injuries, and I think we sometimes underestimate how much that can change the course of a season. In 2018, yes, that was a bad defense, but they suffered injuries to a record-breaking degree at just about every level of that defense.
Mm-hmm.
There were some guys, midway through the season that I was having trouble keeping track of. I mean, it just a lot of unfamiliar names that season, and. What happened in 2019? Well, things not only regressed, but the BUCS were actually on defense very fortunate injury-wise, especially in the secondary. It's that old saying: the best ability is availability. And if you remember, in 2018 they lost Vernon Hargraves, they lost.
Brent Grimes a little bit.
Grimes,
yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so you had Carlton Davis and MJ Stewart, but they were rookies, right? So they were kind of thrown into the fire. Now in 2019, those guys had more experience. You had Sean Murphy Bunting emerge, Jamel Dean, and again they stayed healthy. So that'll be something to kind of watch going forward. If they stay healthy, that defense should hold its own. I mean, there's some tough quarterbacks on the schedule. Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees, twice a year. Matt Ryan, twice a year. So they'll be tested, but their health. I look for that to be a factor.
I think the biggest thing is, you guys recall the Jacksonville game last year. I forget who went out in that game. It might have been Jamel Dean. Ryan Smith came in and just totally didn't look ready to play. You could tell that this guy just wasn't. I mean, I think he's one of the better special team players in the NFL. I think he's really underrated there. But at corner, I just don't see how you can rely on him. So right now, he's one of their main backups as well at corner. So I do agree that health is a big key.
A big part of just speaking on Ryan Smith. Ryan Smith, how many times did that man change positions at this point? Like he came in, I think they had him as a cornerback, safety, and then switched him back to cornerback, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think I forget what he was drafted as. I think it was just the corner, and then they switched him to safety, and then right back.
Yeah, so it's been a tough deal for these guys, and again, these young cats got thrown into the fire so early. That's why I kind of oppose the whole thought of bringing in a veteran. Like at this point, these guys have already cut their teeth, or at least they've been in the fire for so long. Like you can't take them out and then put them back in unless they completely fail on the first, on this new attempt that they have. It's a tough deal for those guys. But yeah, man, that defense. I don't know if it's because I pay so much attention to the defense. I don't think I pay any more attention to the defense than I do the offense. But the defense scares me as far as how it's like, okay, well, we'll just bring back the same guys. Or at least that seems like the plan. Hopefully that all changes tomorrow night at the draft, that they actually show something more, that they're trying to do more than the win now. Just kind of just redo what they did last season and hope it is enough. That don't make sense to me. I hope that's something that's to that. Yeah, it's just the thought of it just made me shiver. I was scared. Damn. Yeah, it's really scary for me, man. So
well, just to follow up on that point too is so in 2018, I don't recall the BUCS. I recall the BUCS really struggling with takeaways, right?
Yeah, they had a terrible.
They were toward the bottom of the league, right?
Yeah.
And then in 2019, that's really volatile, right? That statistic. I mean, it can be random sometimes. And last year, they were in the top 5. I'm looking right now, 28 total takeaways, 12 interceptions, 16 fumbles. And that fumble statistic, that one's especially random, tied for second in the NFL last year with that. So, with some bad fumble luck, they'll probably regress to the mean a little bit there. So, that's another thing to watch out for. It's really hard to sustain that high number of takeaways, but on the flip side, they should have a quarterback who's not giving the ball away as much. So maybe those things cancel each other out.
Now, something about that too, when you're talking about the turnover differential, and of course in 2018 there was a whole lot of flack being given to the defense because they had such a low turnover as far as turnover numbers. Now, 2016, 2017, these guys were among the highest. They were the top 10. They were inside the top 10 on all these other years for getting turnovers. But we turned the ball over so much, the turnover differential was minimal. Like it was nothing. But the BUCS were taking the ball away as much as anybody else in the NFL. But it didn't matter because we were giving the ball away so much. Again, to your point, hopefully that's a completely different story going forward, or at least for the next 2 or 3 years. And we'll see what happens from there. But the turnover stuff, man, I've talked about it for so much for so long that it almost looked like an attack on one person, and I call a whole lot of hell because of it. But it was when I mention turnovers, I don't even put a name on them. I just said turnovers, and it was bad. it was super bad.
But there are some. There are some encouraging signs with this defense, right? They're young. I think I give Todd Bowles a lot of credit. I think he's one of the best defensive coordinators, one of the best coordinators in football, period. So I think there's reason for optimism there. But some of the same red flags that existed after 2016 heading into the 2017 season still exists now. I mentioned turnovers. Another popular one. Remember back in 2016, the BUCS third down defense drew a lot of raves because they were holding opponents to a low conversion percentage on third down. And that's another volatile statistic. I mean, if you're not good on first and second down, you can still be good on third down just because teams are getting their first downs earlier. They're getting it on first and second down. Last year, the BUCS were among the league leaders in opponent third down conversion percentage too. So that might regress a little bit. It's one reason why I think they were top. According to Football Outsiders efficiency measures, they were a top 5 defense last year. I think they could still be a top 10 defense this coming season. Yeah. But it's going to be really hard to kind of sustain where they were, especially down the stretch last season. Some weaker competition, granted, but there's probably going to be a bit of regression there. That's just football.
What do you mean? Mm-hmm. What do you mean? Bears not going to get 19 sacks again? The hell? Calling my season ticket rep.
Even Pierre Paul, I don't know how he keeps doing it, but like he's converting a high rate of his pressures into sacks, and eventually, that just doesn't seem sustainable to me, or I'm just going to have to admit at some point that I'm wrong, and he's I don't know how he's been able to do that the past couple of seasons. I can't remember exactly how many games he played last year, but he had 8 sacks in about half a season.
Yeah. Yep.
It's unreal. It's scary. It's an alien. Something like that.
Yeah, he's a freak. He's and something else that I think is being overlooked a little bit is the loss of Carl Nassib. I believe he had 6 sacks or 5.5, something like that last year. Those were valuable sacks as well. So I know they like Anthony Nelson, but I mean, do you expect Anthony Nelson to come in and get 5.5, 6 sacks? I don't know. I personally think they still need an addition there to the end rotation for the pass rushers, but.
So let me do this, and I may end on this, and it's almost going full circle. So, with us talking about the concerns for the defense and the ebb and flow, the up and downs, the injuries, and so forth. If you had your one pick in the first round, with number 14 pick, being that we just had this discussion we just had, would you advocate for an offensive tackle, be it left tackle or right tackle, or would you get one of the best or a defensive lineman? Let's say in no holds barred, everybody's available. Which direction do you go?
Well, that is a tough question because I do think right now the bigger need is tackle. I'm not denying that. But if you're thinking about the future and just an impact that a defensive line can have on a game, and they can wreck a quarterback's life, man. If you don't got time, it throws off everything, the rhythm of the offense. You can't run the ball. You can't do anything. But at the same time, man, I normally don't, but in this situation, I probably still go with tackle. Just because probably either like a Jedrick Wills or Tristan Wirfs. Just because I think it is a huge need, and I think it's something that they've, like you said, they've needed for a while. I can't really remember the last time that they had a tackle that was described as like really good. DeMar Dotson, I think, has been solid over his career. I think Donovan Smith is okay, but they haven't had that really, really good tackle since, I don't know, maybe Donald Penn a few years back. Yeah, he had a few years that were really good. So I think it's time to finally get one of those guys.
Mr. Bassinger, your call. You got everybody on the board. One of the top
You
four.
ready for this?
One of the top 4 tackles, every defensive lineman, every wide receiver. Who is your pick? Which direction you going?
Give me a lunch pail workhorse running back.
And Thomas Bassinger has left the call.
No. I'm. That's by the way, that's a telltale sign that I've been kidnapped and I'm in grave danger. If you ever hear me say something like that again. Again, I've got to go offensive tackle, especially if one of those top 4 or 5 guys is there at pick 14, and I think one will. It's not just right tackle, but you're not necessarily locked into Donovan Smith beyond after this season either. There's no dead money. I know he signed through 2021, but there's no dead money after this season left on his contract. So they have an out there. So you could be looking at, if you don't draft a tackle at all in this draft. I think they almost certainly will. But you really don't want to be in a position next year where you're looking for 2. Again, I go back to how hard it is to find these guys in free agency. You sometimes get lucky, but if you go that route, they're really, really expensive. So I think it's the thing to do from a need standpoint, but just from a financial sustainability standpoint too. If one of those 4 or 5 guys is there, that's probably what I do. Though it'd be tempting. It'd be tough to pass up Kinlaw.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people mention Kinlaw, but very few, at least shockingly few, mention Derek Brown. That kind of bothers me a little bit. Makes me nervous.
I don't like Derek Brown's fit in the defense as much as I like Kinlaw's. I think Derek Brown's a good player, but I think his ceiling as a pass rusher, I think, is much worse than Kinlaw's. I think Kinlaw next to Vita Vea is a better fit than Brown next to Vita Vea.
Really? You know,
I mean, do you think?
Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, do you think Brown even falls to that far to 14?
Man, I don't think.
Probably not.
I don't think Kinlaw
But at this
falls.
at this rate, I don't think Kinlaw's falling either.
But I mean, not. I guess I'll say this: a month or so ago, actually not a month or so ago, 2 months ago, when I started. Nah, it was longer than that. Anyways, when I started looking at both Brown and Kinlaw, it was probably November, and the very first thing that I mentioned about Derek Brown was that he looked just like Ndamukong Suh from his college days for me. He was very much the same guy. He was a bully. Like he was that kind of a guy to me. Then I kind of backed off that just a little bit more because I started watching a few more of his games where he kind of was a little bit more quiet, and I realized he had Marlon Davidson on the other end at defensive end. He was rotating between defensive tackle and defensive end there. So he was playing with a pretty decent line. But Kinlaw is a monster. Kinlaw is a super talented pass rusher, and of course he stops the run on the way to the quarterback. I don't know if I had to choose between one of the two, I don't think I could. Like I would take both of them. Both of them next to Vita Vea. I swear to goodness, either one of those cats next to Vita Vea is going to take up two people most of the time. Derek Brown can also occupy two people. Like once he starts getting going, you know, if either one of those cats on the board and neither one of them gets selected at number 14 with the BUCS, I'm walking from Atlanta.
Well, so what would you do? So let's say that there's Kinlaw's on the board, but they pass on him for an offensive tackle, and it's one of the top four guys.
I'd be upset. Like I would be upset, and for me, it's not about filling in a starter position or filling in that slot. It's more about who makes a difference as far as a strategy for the opposing team. Like a right tackle, an offensive tackle, right tackle, they're gonna block their guy. They're gonna end up blocking their guy, maybe one more. I mean, that's just what it is. A good defensive tackle, defensive lineman, that's gonna free up. You know, it's gonna put two people on there. There's gonna be four hands on there for a good amount of snaps of the game. That's gonna free up Jason Pierre-Paul. That's gonna free up Shaq Barrett. And on this note, if you go back and look at Shaq Barrett's sacks, go see how many people got their hands on Vita Vea. You just look up his sacks, and you see how many people Vita Vea is occupying on a lot of those sacks. That is the exact point I look at when I'm talking about building defensive line. That's not going to be the case with an offensive tackle. Obviously, I'd be more than happy if we get a guy who everybody feels comfortable with and is a good player. But I would rather get a difference maker more than get in a starting right tackle or starting left tackle. Just my opinion.
Well, I mean, so you don't think that a starting right tackle or left tackle can make a good enough difference? I mean, I think if this offensive line's better than last year, I think the BUCS are a better team.
Absolutely, I definitely think that a right tackle would be the difference in the run game as well as the pass game. That's the same for any either side, the left tackle or the right tackle. So yeah, a good tackle that can run block as well as pass block absolutely makes a difference. I'm not saying that they'll make a difference. I don't think it makes as big of a difference as what one of the defensive linemen would do, because like you mentioned before, that can be game wrecking. That can be game altering. Having a defensive lineman that can rattle the quarterback and stop the run game for any team. That's
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever mean to besmirch the offensive tackle and what they do and what they can do. Again, I've been preaching to get the backup for DeMar Dawson and the eventual placement in for like literally 5-6 years. So I definitely know what they can do, but that's just what a good right tackle can do, or at least a starting right tackle. That's what the baseline should be for a starting right tackle, being able to run block as well as pass block. But when you're talking about an exceptional pass rusher, somebody that again can alter what an offense does, how many times will somebody have to alter what the defense does with a right tackle or left tackle? They just move to the other side. Your best pass rusher just moves from one side to the other. That's just been my take. And I wish I had this clip. I swear I wish I had this clip. About a week ago, Warren Sapp was on. He was on one of the ESPN shows. He was talking to. I guess it was it Marcus Spears or Wiley, one of them. But they were talking about one of the last things he said. They were talking about which one would they prefer, taking the left tackle or the right tackle when it comes to pass rushing. And they're all, give me the fat guy every time. Give me the fat guy. That's where Reggie White got all of his sacks from. They were comparing Reggie White and Bruce Irvin, who was the better pass rusher. And they just made mention of the right tackle was the one who always got attacked. That was who everybody goes after. If you find an exceptional left tackle, you take him, because that can possibly stop somebody's complete defense if that's all they have is one guy who can make their way to the quarterback. But for the most part, I don't think your right tackle is going to save you any games.
Okay.
I mean, that's my opinion.
I think it's fair. I think that's fair. I mean, I do think that the impact that a defensive tackle could have, especially in the stat column, obviously, will make a huge difference. So.
Yeah, I mean, I speak about all the stuff. I just have to say it with respect to NFL level football. All these cats work hard. All these cats are, the best at what they do in the world. Even if they're not the best on the team or the best in the league, they all work hard and they all, do stuff most of us absolutely won't ever do. So I don't mean to talk down on anybody's work or what their worth is, but if I'm looking at the BUCS in specificity, I'm looking at them and I'm looking at they possibly won't move their left tackle to right tackle. So if they're drafting a tackle, it's probably going to be a right side guy. I just don't see how that outweighs or how it would impact the game more so than a defensive lineman getting to the quarterback. Yeah, man, I think I'm just going to end on that, though. But I want to thank you, Cass, man, both of you, Mr. Thomas Bassinger and young Evan. First time getting to speak with you, man. I greatly appreciate you. I love your work, you and Rhett, on the Cannon Fire podcast. I like your no-nonsense attitude and your depth of knowledge, man. I greatly appreciate and listen to it. What do you guys have coming up for tomorrow's draft, if anything? Are you guys broadcasting during the draft? Do you guys have something else coming up?
No, we're not broadcasting during the draft. We'll just do our draft recap probably on Sunday or Monday. And then, like I said, we got 2 brand new shows up right now. Our draft special show where, we're talking about a bunch of different draft scenarios. I reveal a little mock draft I did. And then, we also have another episode talking about Gronkowski a little bit. So some fans called in and, shared their thoughts. And, thanks for having me on, Robert. Really appreciate it. And it was a great time.
Indeed. And young Thomas Bassinger of the Tampa Bay Times, you have the BUCS Red Zone newsletter. It's gonna be full of it's gonna be pretty packed with the stuff coming off of this week. What you got coming up, man?
Yeah, so we'll have a draft preview coming up. We'll have a couple editions of the BUCS Red Zone newsletter this week. So usually I try to publish that about once a week, but we'll have a few extra editions this week, previewing the draft and then analyzing picks and recapping things. Also break down the Gronkowski trade a little bit. So yeah, there's too much happening this week to fit in just one newsletter. So I'll be producing a few extras.
Yeah, the BUCS Red Zone pamphlet / poster coming out this week. Again, man, I want to thank you guys both. I appreciate your time. Again, I greatly appreciate both of your work. Thank you very much, guys. You've been listening to...
Thank you.
Indeed. You guys have been listening to Outside Leverage Podcast. I am Robert Green. You're welcome.